Welcome to the broadcast. It's 2-2 in the bottom of the eighth as the Minneapolis Twins face the Atlanta Braves in Atlanta. We may have an end to that game before this broadcast goes off the air, and we've got a great broadcast for you. First up, we're going to talk about, later on, first up in terms of the segments, we'll have a conversation that is a follow-up to what Bill Moyers did in the Circle of Recovery. We'll do that with Rosemary Rochester, James Waldron, Ann Buell, and Mickler Bishop. But first, I want you to see a preview of an extraordinary conversation we had, because he was extraordinary and interesting, with Paul McCartney. Take a look at this, and then we'll be back later and talk with Paul McCartney. But first, this excerpt. Who influenced you the most?
Little Richard was a big influence on me, because I do a sort of screamy thing that's directly based on what he does. Yeah. Yes, Richard, if you're watching, I admit it all. He's always doing telly. I taught you that, Paul. Woo! Oh, come on, Paul, you know I did. Richard. Well, it's true, Richard, you did. And so I owe him a lot.
And now you paid him back.
This is it, yeah. Now paid in full, Richard. But I doubt whether he's going to be watching this show.
Oh, of course he will.
Of course he will. We'll get him a tape.
It would well.
And Elvis was probably the big influence. But I never liked, I think all of us went off Elvis after he joined the army.
Yeah. What you
went off him.
Went off him. Okay.
Started to dislike what he did, because he was so magical before the army.
What was magical about him?
He looked great.
Yeah, he did.
You know, which was, he just looked great. And if you saw photos of him, it was like, who's that? Wow, you know. And then I think he was like one of the world's greatest vocalists. I mean, he was a heck of a voice, Elvis.
It was that good at that time.
I think so. Yeah, I was a major fan. But when he went into the army, it all got all a bit sort of, you know, yes, sir.
Yeah.
You know, it all got
That's
a bit,
exactly
yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, sir.
You can do it, too.
And the songs went downhill.
Yeah.
With sort of hard-headed woman and stuff. It just, with the trombone solo.
More on Paul McCartney later. But first, a look at a special that's going to be on public television, his new performance in Liverpool that he composed. Here it is. Welcome to the broadcast.
Thank you.
Pleasure to have you here. Don't do that to me from the beginning.
I'm not going to do it. I'm going to answer civilly and sensibly.
Let me just talk about this. Going back to Liverpool, how did this oratorio get started? I mean, this is, you're talking about your roots, your home, your place.
What happened was, about 2 years ago, the orchestra commissioned me, and Carl Davis, who I wrote it with. They said, can we commission you to write a piece that will help us celebrate 150 years in the orchestra business? That's how long the orchestra's been going. Yeah. So I'd been flirting with classical sounds with the Beatles, you know, with Yesterday and Eleanor Rigby and certain things there. I'd sort of used French horns early on, and I used a piccolo trumpet once on Penny Lane. So I'd always loved all of this, you know, I'd been intrigued with the whole idea. But I'd never really dared do it, because it's quite a big move to make. Yeah. But suddenly I had an offer. And they said, well, you know, it's Liverpool, you know about Liverpool. Yeah. They said, it's a great orchestra, it's to be performed in the cathedral, which was my kind of local cathedral. My school that I spent all my time from like from 11 till 17 at, overlooks the cathedral. So, and John Lennon went to the art school next door. So it's all so connected. I just said, yep, I'll do it.
I'll do it. Was it hard? Was it more difficult than you thought?
No, it was easier than I thought.
Why?
Because I love music. I'm a big music fan. And when you work in rock and roll, people tend to think, well, that's what he must listen to, that's what he must like. But I've got pretty broad taste in music. I mean, one of my favourite records of all time is Fred Astaire singing Cheek to Cheek.
Yeah.
I just love, if it's a good record.
What is it you love about it?
What, about Cheek to Cheek?
Yeah.
I love his voice. I love his style.
The elegance.
I love the backing. I love the words. Heaven. It's just great. You know, it's just always been a favourite of mine. And some of my rock and roll friends might sort of laugh at it and sort of say, well, what are you doing? But I still think it's a great thing.
Because there were some people who've tried crossover to classical. I mean, Andrew Lloyd Webber's had some trouble with Requiem. Some people didn't think it was as good as it might have been. Did it give you any trepidation?
No, I'm one of these people, whenever I get a kind of offer like that, I just go into it totally. I'm gung-ho. It's about halfway through that I realise I should have gone into it with some trepidation. It's only about halfway. I was in a pub. I used to go to this pub just before I met up with my collaborator. There was an Irish actor in there, and he was talking about, and I was talking about what I was doing. He said, but aren't you scared stiff?
Yeah.
I said, well, not really. But of course then I thought, well, maybe I should be. Maybe he's right. Maybe I shouldn't be taking this all so easy. But it wasn't a question of taking it easy. When you asked, you know, was it hard or easy? It just seemed an easy thing for me to do because I love making up music. This obviously was a whole different palette from anything I'd used before, you know.
But the skills of a songwriter that you had, melody is something that comes easy to you.
Well, you know, I'd read articles over the kind of last 20 years by people like Leonard Bernstein and stuff, and they'd single me out, and they'd say, you know, that guy McCartney's not bad, you know, and there's a French cellist called Tortelier who sort of said that all the modern composers, they write blink-blonk music, it's no good, we do not like to play this, you know. They said, maybe there should be the melodies, it was very good. So I always kind of thought, I could do that, I could do it, I know what he's talking about. I don't, you know, I'm interested in some plinky-plonk music, but generally I like a bit of a melody to get hold of, you know.
And counterpoint, too, you're known for that?
Well, I mean, you know, I don't really know what the official explanations are for what I'm doing. There was a famous article that John and I had on us by William Mann of the Times, who's no longer with us, but it was a great article. It was all about the Beatles and the Aeolian cadences and the pentatonic.
And you said what?
You say, what pentatonic
what is he talking
clusters?
About? Yeah.
We said, what's a pentatonic cluster? He said, well, you know, like I think it was the end of She Loves You was that. But the point being, you know, that we always loved doing this stuff. We got very involved, and the Beatles stuff is quite arranged. You know, something like Day in the Life is quite a orchestrally conceived thing.
But there are those who would say, for all of his genius, for all of his greatness, for all of his experience, McCartney doesn't read or write music.
No, well, that's true. But I've never...
Let that stand in your way.
I've never thought it was a drawback. In fact, you know, there's many times I've tried to learn, and I've decided not to. Now, I don't think I really want to learn now. I've got a kind of superstitious feeling that I'll learn too much. See, I work with people. Somebody like Carl Davis is a great talent. I mean, he used to be a child prodigy on the piano, and he can write music down. He's just phenomenal that way. But I notice when he comes to write a melody, he knows Schubert's work, he knows Mahler's work, he knows all this stuff I don't know. I mean, I've vaguely heard, you know.
But yeah.
I know the sort of Nutcracker Suite and the sort of popular stuff, but I don't know the work. And what I find is he starts to wander into a Schubert melody. Now, I think it's an advantage that I don't know where Schubert went.
Because it gives you more freedom and more license.
I don't know where to go, and that's what the fun is for me. Yeah. When I start off on a journey, I don't know where I'm going to end up. So it was very exciting that way, and I think, you know, maybe that is why I shouldn't learn.
Did you think about John, because you were back writing about Liverpool, because you said it at some point that he would love the risk that you were taking?
Yeah, I don't know if he'd have wanted to do it himself, but yeah, I think he would have liked the idea of suddenly jumping out of your skin and doing something else that was alien to you. I did think about John once or twice in writing it. There's a character in the second movement. Well, it's not so much a character, it's a thought that the main male character has in the second movement. He talks about sagging off, which is the Liverpool way of playing hooky.
Yeah.
A Liverpool word for
sagging off.
Sagging off.
Which means what? Just to go away and
sagging off,
take
hooky.
the day off
take
and
the day
not
off,
show
take
up.
the afternoon
Right.
off mainly.
Right, yeah.
They noticed if you took the day off. So you
Yes,
clock in the morning,
Yeah.
have lunch. I don't want to get anyone get the wrong idea here. Children, don't do this.
Only after you come home from
Very
school.
bad. But we used to do that. And I must admit, the school scene was a little bit, sort of getting a little bit sort of pious.
Yeah.
So I threw in this attitude. And as I did it, I thought, yeah, this was me, John, taking time off, because he went to the college next door.
Yeah. When did you first meet him?
I met John when, I think when I was about 15 or so. I had a friend, a very good friend of mine called Ivan Vaughan, who I went to school with, who was born on exactly the same day as I was. So we became friends because of that. And he lived in a place called Woolton. And he said, I've got this great mate, you know.
Yeah.
He said, I've got this great mate, you should meet him, you know. And I said, well, you know. And he said, well, look, they're playing. This mate's got a bit of a group, what they used to call skiffle groups. It's an early kind of acoustic blues kind of things, you know, lots of guitars. They used to have washboards. It's kind of country and western, I suppose.
That's where I'm from, North Carolina, so I understand that.
But it's the old-fashioned type, you know, not the sort of the new sort of slick type. It's the real old, you know, washboards.
Right.
Okay, boy. And John used to have this skiffle group, and he said they're playing on Saturday at Woolton Village Fete. He said, you should come along, you know. So I said, well, great, you know, I'll come along. And I remember coming into the fete and seeing these people on the stage, and seeing John in a checked shirt with a sort of coif, and singing this song. He was singing a song, he had a little do, you know. Yeah, well, it was the fate, wasn't it?
Yeah,
You know,
it was.
Come on. But, and he was there, and he was doing great, and he was looking great and everything, but he was singing all the wrong words. There was a song called Come Go With Me by the Dell Vikings.
Yes.
But because he was supposed to be a skiffle group, and plus he didn't have the record, so he just made it up. He was kind of, come go with me to the penitentiary. Hey, and he was making all this stuff.
Yes.
Who is this person? But then I met him a little later that day, and I was surprised at how drunk and horrible he was. Because I was younger than him. He was just 16.
He was a bad influence on you, was he?
Well, he was getting a six-pack down him, you know. It was Saturday, and he was getting going. I was later to learn those tricks, but I was a little bit innocent at the time. Yeah, I remember this guy sort of just smelly breath over my shoulder, sort of thinking, oh, dear me, hoodlum, you know, hello.
Now, and when did you get together after that? How long before you began to
say... We played around backstage that day. My friend took me backstage. It was a little church hall, you know, anyone could have got in, but we just went along there. And a few of the guys were just sitting around waiting for the evening performance. They played in the afternoon at the fete and then did an evening thing. And we were jamming around, and I knew this song called 20 Flight Rock by Eddie Cochran, and I knew all the words. And this was great currency in those days. If
to know the words.
If you knew all the words, they wanted you in a group.
Even if you couldn't sing.
Because he knows the words to it. You know, this is like, we can chuck him out next week, but he knows the words. And we often travelled miles to get the words to it, or a chord. Right. B7. We went right across, clear across Liverpool to get
find
B7.
a chord.
Come on.
Yeah.
It was a great one. I still know it.
Do you? Can you give it to me?
No, sorry. But, yeah, you know, it was just
but
very
did it start after that?
So what happened was, after that jamming thing, I just went back home and forgot about it all. And I was cycling around that area about a week afterwards, and one of the fellas at the group came up, and he was on his bike too, and he said, hey, they want you to join the group. You know, they thought that was great. They knew all the words.
They want some more songs. That's what they said. Before you come in, do you know any more words?
That's right. Well, it was basically, I only knew that one, but it was enough.
Yeah.
And George Harrison, I got George in the group later because he knew a song called Raunchy.
So then they had two songs.
So we had two songs then, and John didn't know Come Go With Me, so we were set.
So and the rest is history.
The rest is... No, it was very innocent. You know, it was really nice. And so we just got together a band, and we were terrible. We were very, very bad. And we were very bad for a few years. And we sort of got off to Hamburg and improved a bit because we were just working so long.
Was there a moment in which you knew we are going to be bigger than anything the world has ever seen?
I think when we came to America, we started to think that kind of thought. I mean, we always thought, yeah, we're kind of maybe better than a couple of the little local groups we're playing with.
Right.
But we never realized that it would be, you know, the big phenomenon, I think, till we came to America. And it was so huge here. And the thing was, you see, all the British acts who'd come before us had never come back huge. They'd always been like sort of third on the bill to Bobby Rydell and Frankie Avalon and stuff. And we were saying, third on the bill to them? You know, you're number one in our country. We think you ought to top bills. So it always used to look a bit embarrassing when our great stars came back after having, you know, been on a not very good tour. So we actually made one of the cheekiest decisions I think the Beatles ever made. We said to our manager, we're not going to America till we're number one.
Yeah.
Which is a fairly kind of
jointly
cheeky
it is. I mean, was that your idea, or was that John's idea?
Group.
That you just got together?
Because of these British stars who'd come back with the sort of, you know, slightly, not improved, they hadn't improved their image. We said, well, if we go, it could kill us stone dead. We'll go, we'll be third on the bill to Fabian or someone. And
Frankie Avalon,
Frankie,
Bobby Rydell.
You know what I mean? Those kind of secondary guys. They weren't Elvis. It wasn't Chuck Berry. It wasn't the main guys, Little Richard and stuff.
Otis Redding.
Otis Redding. It wasn't any of those guys. These were kind of, you know, even perceived in their own country as sort of second stringers, I think. You know, we liked them.
Of those guys, who influenced you the most?
Little Richard was a big influence on me, because I do a sort of screamy thing that's directly based on what he does. Yes, Richard, if you're watching, I admit it all. He's always doing telly. I taught you that, Paul. Woo! Oh, come on, Paul, you know I did. Richard. Well, it's true, Richard, you did. And so I owe him a lot.
And now you paid him back.
This is it, yeah. Now paid in full, Richard. But I doubt whether he's going to be watching this show.
Oh, of course he will.
Of course he will. We'll get him a tape.
It would well.
And Elvis was probably the big influence. But I never liked, I think all of us went off Elvis after he joined the army.
Yeah. You
went off him.
Went off him. Okay.
Started to dislike what he did. Because he was so magical before the army.
What was magical about him?
He looked great.
Yeah, he did.
You know, which was, he just looked great. And if you saw photos of him, it was like, who's that? Wow, you know. And then I think he was like one of the world's greatest vocalists. I mean, he was a heck of a voice, Elvis.
It was that good at that time.
I think so. Yeah, I was a major fan. But when he went into the army, it all got a bit sort of, you know, yes, sir, sir, sir. You know, it all got
That's
a bit,
exactly
yes, sir. Okay, sir.
You can do it, too.
And the songs went downhill.
Yeah.
Sort of hard-headed woman and stuff. It just with the trombone solo. Sorry, love.
And after that, though, who? Any other Americans?
Yeah, Buddy Holly, big influence on us all. Buddy Holly allowed John to wear glasses. John had these big, thick horn-rimmed glasses, but he'd always had to take them off if girls were around. And so it made it very difficult. To sort of lead him on stage. You know, where is it? Which way are they? They're out there, son. Sing, you know. So when Buddy Holly came along, he was able to sort of take these out and wear them proudly. So Buddy was a big influence.
It was a great time to be single for you guys.
I'll go along with it.
Yes, I mean, if you could be anything when you were that age, you wanted to be the Beatles. You just imagine. It wasn't riding in the limousines. It is just the women.
Well, I mean, you know, if you think about it, you know, with now, I often liken it to a minefield. It's like walking through a minefield. I mean, now there's AIDS.
Yeah, right.
In my dad's day, there was all sorts of
syphilis or whatever,
syphilis and stuff, pregnancies.
Right.
But suddenly there was this pill, and there didn't seem to be any sort of threatening diseases. So it suddenly changed things, you know, and girls became apparently sort of rather available. And you know, who was I to turn it down, or who were you? You know what I mean? We were just. I blame the hormones myself.
You had no choice. They made you do it. My hormones made me do it.
Made me do it. Yep. Gov, your worship.
The breakup, was it hard for you?
Yeah, very difficult. Yeah.
Why was it so?
Well, because they were sort of my best mates in the world. Kind of, there are four of us against the world, and then suddenly, you know, it wasn't like that. It was, in fact, one time it was 3 against me. Because I decided to not go with this guy, this manager guy, New York guy, Alan Klein. And I thought he was robbing us. And the others didn't. They were very enamored of him. So I had to kind of do all sorts of horrible things, like sue them. It was the most fun thing. Because I said to my lawyers, I said, can we sue this Alan Klein bloke? They said, no, he's not a party to any of the agreements. I said, oh, he said, if you want to sue, if you want to get, because
you've got to sue.
You've got to sue the guys.
And they said, what did John say when he found out you were suing him?
Not exactly pleased.
Yeah, I mean, was it a phone call saying, what are you doing?
No, it wasn't gone beyond phone calls. There was no phone calls. You just didn't talk to each other for a long time.
Yeah.
So it was quite painful. I mean, just trying to save everything we'd ever made to that date. Imagine yourself, everything you've ever earned in broadcasting is in a bank somewhere, and someone's about to take it. Well, you've got to fight pretty hard, you know.
But you've been savvy about it. I mean, people, true or not, you have an extraordinary sense of business and a willingness to fight for what you think is fair.
Well, I don't know about that. You know, I've got really great people
deal.
around.
You know, you went in and bought up some of those things, and that created a little bit of ill will, didn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It does happen and stuff. Yeah, it's very difficult, all of that. I mean, if you've got 3 hours, we can talk about that. I'm happy
I've got
to talk
3 hours. You don't. That's
the
problem.
Well, I haven't got 3, but we want to talk about it.
Yeah.
What happened was, after the Beatles had broken up,
right.
I said to everyone, well, let's just go our own ways then. You know, let's not sort of get crazy. And for the first year, they held on. We held on to each other's contracts. It was like, we're not letting you go. I said, well, we're breaking up. You know, it's a group. You've got to let me go and let me go somewhere. They said, no, you're still on our label. So it was this terrible feeling, and you were still recording. So in the end, I went over to Capitol, and it actually wasn't me. It was my lawyers, my father-in-law and my brother-in-law, John and Lee Eastman. Went to Capitol, and they said, OK, we're going to give you a big 6-record deal, solo, Paul, it's all going to be marvelous and stuff. And Capitol said, what do you want for it? And they said, well, we don't want cash, but we notice you've got certain rights in there that are yours and are nothing to do, it's not the Beatles' end of it. I think the misconception is that people, when they didn't like what I did, they felt that I was sort of nicking some of the Beatles
Capitol
stuff.
didn't take what the Beatles owned and gave it to you. Capitol took what they owned and gave it to you because you were bargaining.
If you do a record contract, you know, they keep a big bit and give you a little bit.
Yeah, right.
We had the little bit. So my lawyers said, well, give us a bit more of that big bit that's yours. They could have asked for sort of a bit of the Beach Boys. That wouldn't have been sensible, you know. So anyway, they did that, and later I happened to mention to the guys that I'd done this, and they really hit the roof. I can see why, you know, because it looked like, well, also we'd been so equal as the Beatles. It was really a 4-way split every way down the line. But I pointed out to them, we're no longer the Beatles. We've just split up. You know, this is what a split up is. We now go our own ways. So if I sort of get a deal. But anyway, it hurt them, and I can see why, you know. But we equalized it up later. We did a thing where we all sat down, so they now have exactly what I got. John, so in fact, it helped them, really. Yeah.
John never had another songwriter other than you, right? Did he ever write with anyone?
Yoko.
Yoko, okay, but other than Yoko, you were the only.
I think, yeah, possibly. I'm not sure if that's true. It's
near
enough true. Besides Yoko, I think I was the only other person who wrote. Yeah.
Where were you when he died?
I was at home in England very early in the morning, and someone from my office rang me and told me, and I was alone in the house, so it was kind of shattering news. I mean, it was the most shattering news. You sort of know your parents are going to die. When they die, that's shattering. But you kind of know, you know, when you're a little kid, you say, Daddy, you'll die one day, you know, and it's a thing you always live with. Your mates, you think they'll live as long as you do, and we'll all go to great old age. So John's thing was particularly shattering. And Linda had taken the kids to school, and so I had to wait for her to get back, and she sort of got out of the car, and John's dead, you know. It was just, I don't know, we just sort of went indoors and just sort of sat around a lot, you know. And then we all went to work, all of us, George all in our different things. We all chose to go into work that day, which is a sort of strange thing. I don't think we could have coped sitting around the house thinking about it all day. So we just all went into work and thought about it all day at work. But at least there were people around. There were people who would sort of say, you know, have a cup of tea or take your mind. It was very, very difficult, you know. But those things, they're so sort of shattering because, I mean, I think the guy who did it is the jerk of all jerks. That was a phrase came to me that day, you know, as I was sort of sitting there crying and just thinking, jerk of all jerks, this guy now qualifies. He's now, you know, but there's nothing to be done about it. It's happened. It's so frightening and scary and stuff. But there you go, you know.
Is some of that reflected in this oratorio? Some of those feelings, some of that?
I think, you know, as you grow up, these things happen to you. We talked about the death of your parents
Right.
and stuff. As you get older, you know more people who've died.
Yeah, yeah.
And
It
I
is amazing.
I think your emotional well gets more full. You're more used to crying. I think, I mean, when I was a little kid, I cried a lot, but then there came a point where I stopped crying because I'm a man now. Well, now I don't care. If I'm about to cry, I
just cry. Yeah.
No, not right now.
It was after that. Did you move away from the Beatles in a sense? Because the most recent tour, you did a lot of the old songs more.
Yeah, what
there was
happened
almost a
was-
sense of you coming back to.
Yes,
The audience has
rediscovering it, yeah.
always wanted you to be there and
Yes.
never would let you go. But you seem to be saying, let me do these other things. But
Well, it wasn't just me. All of us did that.
Yeah.
It was a kind of reaction we all had. George made an album called All Things Must Pass, which was a big successful thing. When he toured, he didn't do any Beatles stuff. John, when he did any concerts, it was all Instant Karma, stuff with Yoko. We all left all the Beatles stuff alone because it reminded us of the pain of the divorce kind of thing. And also, obviously, the other question in all of our minds was, is there life after the Beatles? You know, or do we have to be Beatles all our lives? And at that particular point, it was painful to admit you have to be Beatles all your lives. You're Charlie Chaplin,
Right.
And we know you are, you know, so you can't
and
get
don't
away
ever
from
do
it.
anything but what Charlie Chaplin would do.
Do the funny walk,
Yes,
Charlie.
right.
We don't want to see all that limelight,
Yeah.
clever stuff.
Yes.
Nope.
Don't take
You know,
any chances with
want
us.
The funny moustache and the funny walk and the cane,
Yeah.
or we won't like you. And so we fought with that for a number of years. And each
And
of
the
us...
Stones did too, didn't they? The Rolling Stones had
Yeah,
a...
you know, they... In what way?
Well, didn't they have the same problem when they would try to break away from all the old
Well,
stuff?
they could never do new material.
Right.
That's always a problem, though. That's something else.
Okay.
I don't think that's
That's
the
not
same.
the same. Okay.
It's a different thing. People don't want to hear new material.
Right.
You've got to sort of
But
beg to play it.
and how did you? And was it a struggle though for you? You know, because you were living with this notion they always wanted you to be the Beatles. They just wanted you to be the Beatles.
Yeah, it was pretty difficult. But I just decided to start back at square one,
Right.
get a group, and I either had to decide I was quitting music, or I had to work after the Beatles. And my mind, which is sometimes people think I'm pretty conniving. It's actually, it's quite simple, my mind. I just thought, well, I'll get another group then, and I'll get out there. And that's exactly what we did.
Is it that easy though? I mean, people do
No,
some.
it's not easy. I didn't
You know,
say
but
it's
but I
easy,
mean, but did you just sort of say it that way? I'll just look. I've got to do something.
I'll tell you exactly what I said. I said, hey, Lynn, Johnny Cash has got a group.
You didn't say
Why don't we get a group? That's exactly
No,
what
come
it-
on. Was that the way it was?
That's exactly what it was, yeah. I said then, very innocently,
Yeah.
when you think what followed, I said to Linda, do you want to be in it?
And
said,
that's
"You
how
got
it started.
And that's how it started. Then later they said he shouldn't have his old
Yeah, they
lady
did.
up on stage. What's she doing there and all that sort of
And
stuff.
so, what'd you say to that?
I said, she's my mate. You know,
Yeah.
I'd like to have her here, please.
Because you just want her presence there.
Yeah.
Because
That's basically what it is.
That's it. You want her
It
near
still
you.
is. It still
Yeah.
is basically that, yeah. We do it for that reason. You see, when you're a young group starting in the business, you can do anything you want. You can have your wife on stage, you can have your mother on stage if you want.
Yeah.
Nobody minds, because nobody's got any preconceived ideas of
Yeah,
what
exactly.
you do. You have the dogs,
Yeah.
all the dogs. This is this marvelous act. They take the mother, the wife. Fantastic.
How innovative.
You know,
Yeah.
you can do that there. But once you've established yourself as the Beatles, or as, you know, then you try and break that mold. That is more difficult. But I just decided it's my life, it's not their life. They may not like it, but we'll muddle through. And we did. We did
Is that
very well, actually.
Wings did very
Yeah,
well.
in Wings, we always thought we were failing because we always matched everything to the Beatles.
right.
We just held it up. And said,
We
"Not as good."
being just you or
The group.
The group.
No, the
Yeah.
group. Everything we ever did always was done in the shadow of the Beatles, because the Beatles had done this, bigger than us, they'd done that, they were better and singing better, and so on. The guitar player was better, the drummer was better. But we had to just live with that and say, yeah, well, okay, that's true maybe. The Beatles is certainly a hard act to follow,
Yeah.
but follow it, I will.
What is it about the Beatles? I mean, you must have thought
Great
about
group.
Great group.
Great group, la. No, they were a very special group. The chemistry was very special.
The time was right.
Yeah, more than that, though. More than that. I mean, we were different from other groups. I hate to say this, but we were slightly cleverer at the time than most groups. John had been to an art college, which the Stones were a bit the same, Jagger and Richard. Slightly cleverer than the average bears you'd find in groups, you know. It was a bit that.
Yeah.
You know, in fact, we used to have jokes with that. with the other groups. We'd pretend to be more intellectual than we were. I remember being backstage in Hamburg once, and a girlfriend of mine sent me Yevtushenko, I think it was, poetry.
Yes.
And I didn't really know about this, but we were sitting around, and a sax player knocked on from one of the other groups. He knocked on the door, and he sort of, he knocked on the door. And when he came in, we were all sort of, and I was reading, the flower, the blossom, I can't remember it. And he crept through. I won't be a minute. He crept through, put his sax down. Okay. He thought we were having a poetry reading, you know. He went out the room, we fell about, you know. But we were always doing that, and I do think that showed. You know, we came to America, people said, don't mention the Vietnam War. Whatever you do, they're very touchy.
Yeah, those Americans.
Those Americans. At this moment, you will not endear yourself to anyone if you say. And the first question, what do you think of the Vietnam War? It's a bad war. And, you know, we were always willing to do that. I mean, you see what John became, you know.
The peace activist he became.
You know, I think you've got to be a little bit intelligent to do some of the stuff he did. John was a pretty good writer, too, sort of. You know.
Why did he
I mean, prose writer rather than songwriter, you know.
Why did he want out?
I think John didn't like to be trapped by anything. I think all of us, you know, the male menopause, I think, is about a feeling of being trapped. Yeah. I used to go out with girls, I used to go to clubs, and now I sit at home. You know, there's a feeling of that. I notice a lot of my friends get that. I think with John, middle-age crisis kind of thing, you know, and I think with John, he loved, in fact, when the Beatles broke up, he likened it to his first divorce. He said, I feel great. I feel so energized. He said, just like when I told my wife I was getting divorced, it was such a weight. I felt like free. It was like a butterfly let out of a jar, you know. And I think John had a huge feeling of that. Of course, with Yoko, my feeling was he had to clear the decks too. Yeah. Because if he used to work with Yoko, he couldn't have these sort of Beatle-like appendages coming around with him. Because he had to give his life to Yoko. This was the nature of the relationship, I think.
Nature of her demand, you think?
No, his demand. People get that wrong, you know. John was hopelessly in love with Yoko, you know.
I've interviewed her and had long conversations, and I believe that. People I talk to say to suggest that he didn't love her and didn't control his own life and didn't know what he was doing is to underestimate and insult John.
Exactly.
That he somehow is.
No, John did nothing he didn't want to do. John only did what he wanted to do. He was a very smart guy. And, you know, you could see at that point in his life he'd had a marriage which had been okay for a while, but was getting a little bit pipe and slippers.
Right.
Because I knew his wife, Cynthia, you know, and she did. She wanted a husband who'd just come home and be a nice husband. You know, like John. Wives, I don't want to belittle wives, but it often is a thing that you want your husband to do, you know, just behave kind of thing, you know. But John was more restless, and so when he met Yoko, it just blew the whole gaff wide open.
You've talked about this 1,000 times. I just wanted, just in the context of this conversation, did the two of you ever talk about, you know, about the getting back together? I mean, what's the myth and the reality of that?
The nearest it ever came was Saturday Night Live did as a spoof. They made an offer, and Lorne Michaels, who was producing it, I know quite well now. He went to the accounts department of NBC. And he said, I can get the Beatles reunion, sort of said, what will you pay? And the guy said, well, the standard fee for live acts is so-and-so, and it was like, you know, $24, 34 cents. Right. So they used it as a skit. And they said, if you're out there, Beatles, come on, NBC's offering 24. And John and I happened to be in his house in the Dakota while this was going on. And we said, come on, should we go? Yeah. It's just down the road. And for half a second, we nearly went.
Wow.
But that was like as near as it got, you know. Yeah. Money wasn't good enough.
Money?
$24.
Yeah, right. I thank you for doing this. It's a pleasure. We could go on and on and on. I want to mention, you're going to do another tour?
I am going to go on and on.
You
are leaving?
No. I'm going to. There may be some more Little Richards out there that are waiting for their credit too. Liverpool Oratorio premieres on Great Performances Wednesday, October 30th, 1991, 8:30 to 11. Boy, you got some big name talent here too, singing.
Yeah. Well, I tried to get the best people, you know. I just asked, I said, who's the best? And then they were available, and these are some of the best people, you know.
And this was
the only thing is we had to get a very English-speaking tenor. I said, who are the best tenors? And Pavarotti's name came up, and Dominguez and Carreras. Right. But because it's a story of, you know, so it was, I was born in Liverpool, we figured we couldn't have it because it'd be, and so it was, the day you was born. We said, we can't have it, no matter how good he is, it won't work.
No.
So we got Jerry Hadley.
An Italian Liverpool.
Yeah. So we got Jerry to do it, and he's perfect, you know, he was great.
Yeah. And it was taped actually, what, June 28th or something like that?
Yeah.
With in the cathedral with a boys' choir. And
cathedral, which is the largest in Europe outside St. Peter's, which I never knew. My hometown church turns out to be this great big thing. With the chorus, with the whole orchestra, with the chorus, the boys.
You didn't write in a part for yourself either.
No, I didn't, on purpose though.
Why?
I like the idea. I'd been asked to do this as a composer.
Yeah.
Now, the trouble with me as a performer is the natural first question. Even Carl said to me, are you going to be in it?
Yeah.
And Kiri, when we came to do it, she still says I should do the part of the headmaster.
Yeah.
Boys, this is your teacher. But I said, no, it's the baritone's part, you know, and to do this stuff, you've got, it's a whole other thing, another ballgame. Plus, I get to be in the audience.
Ah, yes.
Weren't they good? I loved it, didn't you? Author! It's great. It's a big change for me. It's kind of night out for me now.
Yeah.
And we're doing it at Carnegie, or they're doing it rather, at Carnegie Hall.
Yeah, there's a documentary that goes with it, too.
The documentary on PBS, yeah, I think they're showing that before the performance thing.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that a girl from the BBC made. She's quite interesting, shows how we got it all together.
But there's never been, the ultimate documentary has never been made. What was it that you wanted of the Beatles?
No, I suppose that's true.
Yeah, but I thought there was some discussion of that at one time.
Yeah, we're
the long and winding road.
We had all sorts of problems, so it always was on the back burner. But now that we've solved our problems, we're thinking of doing a film called Long and Winding Road.
Yeah, which has been talked about for a while.
There's a producer, there's a director sort of engaged now, so it's really looking like it's going to happen.
Would you want to do this again?
Oratorio type thing, absolutely.
More classical music from McCartney.
Definitely, yeah. I really enjoyed it. You know, at every stage along the way, Carl, who I was working with, he said, look, that was the easy bit. Yeah. Doing the nice songs and doing that. He said, now it gets difficult because we've got to orchestrate it. I said, but I've done a bit of this. You know, I've done, I know.
I know melody.
But I also know a bit about orchestration. I don't know it theoretically, but I can hear if that's enough cellos, or if it should be 1 or if it should be 10, you know, and that's really what's involved. So I sat with him every inch of the way. Some people think his bits are the orchestral bits and mine bits are the song bits.
Not true.
But I sat with him every inch of the way. It became a joke in the end. He said, don't worry, Paul, I haven't changed anything. But it was very enjoyable.
And did you feel at the end of this, my God, old McCartney went out and took a giant step and it worked, and I'm pretty proud of the guy. Yeah.
I must say, without being too conceited, the album went to came in at number 1 in the classical charts in England yesterday, so I can now safely say we did it. Yeah. It was a great thing to do. I was very proud because it was Liverpool. People come up to me and say, "Oh, this is good, eh? We're real proud of you," and that was great. That was great just to be in your hometown and have people come up and say, "We're proud of you." Yeah. That's a great word to hear.
I don't know the answer to this. Are your mom and dad alive?
No.
No. So but family there at all?
Oh, the family, yeah, lots of family.
They showed up in the cathedral. Hi, I'm Paul's brother.
They were described in the newspaper as 2 pimply-faced youths and an amply-bosomed woman. Well, they wrote a letter the next week.
Did they, to the editor?
Damn right they did. How dare you describe Auntie Joan as this, you know? But no, it was great. It was a really great event. Yeah. And the making the piece was such great fun. I definitely would like to do it again. And some people have said to me, does this mean you're done with rock and roll and you're now going to go classical? I love the balance. I mean, at the moment...
And one feeds the other, maybe.
Yeah, it does. It does. I'm at the moment writing the sort of next, what you might call pop album. And it's exciting to get back to a bit of guitar, a bit of loud guitar after the classical stuff.
Does it have a title?
No.
No. And you'll be on tour next year, maybe?
Yeah, I think, you know, if
around the world,
go on tour again.
Thank you. Pleasure.
You're welcome.
Very much.
Cheers.
Paul McCartney. I've done some 10,000 interviews over the last, say, 10 years, and this is one of my favorite. Paul McCartney, because he takes a question and he goes with it. And I didn't know whether he wanted to talk about certain things, but he did, and it made an engaging time for me, and I hope we can do it again, and I hope you enjoyed it. Tomorrow, join me for a conversation with Broadway's Rosemary Harris. We'll also have a discussion on Haiti and its future with refugee Bobby Duvall and Carrie Kennedy Cuomo. A fun and informative look at what's on the big screen with some of New York's leading film critics. All of that coming up tomorrow. As we go, we'll have credits over a clip called from a new film about Paul McCartney's last tour, which is at theaters around the country, called Get Back. Thank you for joining us for the conversation with Paul McCartney. I'll see you tomorrow night. Have a nice evening.
Get back to where you once belonged.